Hello and welcome to another Cavell Cloud Conversations podcast. My name is Patrick Watson. I am Director of Research here at Cavell. And today we wanted to talk about voice and how important it is in the modern day of enterprise communications. And I'm joined by Lee Hamilton, who is Head of Product Marketing at Destiny, to talk about the topic. How are you today, Lee?
Very good, Patrick. How are you?
Yes, not too bad, thanks. So we wanted to talk about voice specifically. And I think one of the things, as you and I were talking in the sort of planning of the podcast, we can get very carried away in communications with new communication methods, asynchronous chat, messaging, social media. Destiny is one of the largest providers globally of sort of voice enablement solution for UCaaS providers and service providers. I take it voice is still very much the key communication method that you're focusing on.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a number of solutions and offerings in the market, most notably our UCaaS offering, and then kind of our voice integrations, to which we have with kind of three flavors, really. We have direct routing, so call to teams, millions of users with millions of calls per day, which is, again, growing at a rate of knots. We have Carrier Automate for the BYOC programs and Converge for FMC. So development-wise and kind of product strategy focus-wise, yeah, absolutely. Voice for us is still very, very important in today's market.
One of the things when we repeat our research about most popular communication mediums, and we've done this across different generations to try and understand how younger people want to communicate, how different businesses in different verticals want to communicate, how different businesses in different size segments want to communicate. The top two communication channels that always come back on top are still email and voice communications. But voice adds an additional layer in terms of the richness of data. I remember I've been talking about this for a number of years. From your perspective, is that why you think voice is so important in terms of the richness of the data, of the interaction data that it provides?
It is. I mean, first and foremost, it's real time. So asynchronous obviously has its delays into messaging as a thing, but voice is real time, and there's so much depth to voice which you can kind of gauge. If on a call, especially in customer service, you get people's general sentiment. You get their kind of the way they're feeling. How if they're kind of angry or aggrieved by some kind of service they've had, or particularly happy. You can tell a lot of that from voice. Where in the messaging emails, for example, you don't necessarily get that unless you get a couple of exclamation marks, and they'll kind of point you towards how angry certain people can be. So if you kind of take that kind of base there in terms of voice in general, it's incredibly important. And as you said, layering things onto it, and we're starting to see Microsoft take some huge strides at the moment in terms of that, and obviously the other UCaaS platforms in terms of taking and understanding that sentiment and providing some rich information back to the agents and supervisors and businesses, especially within contact centers, to really kind of sharpen how they conduct their kind of customer experience.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's so different in a voice interaction compared to any other communication medium is exactly what you mentioned there. It's the number of alleles of data, the insights that you can get from a voice conversation as compared to a messaging conversation. And you mentioned it there in terms of sentiment, tone, latency, in terms of how the conversation is flowing. There's so many additional data points. And I think that's one thing from speaking to service providers and telcos globally. They're really keen to be able to add value to their enterprise customers in terms of analysis, data analytics, insights into their platform. And voice interactions really offer that capability over and above a number of other communication mediums. They do.
No, absolutely. And I think it's like I said, if you look at Microsoft, Zoom and WebEx, or the bigger players, that's the play they're making. And originally it was very much kind of voice focused. That dropped off with the rise of AI. So voice, to some degree, at a period of time was kind of still there, but forgotten about in terms of focus. And now you've got the bridging of the two. Which is very, so before we were talking about the kind of the convergence and the bridging of voice and IT, which I think Teams to some degree has successfully done that, and now it's about kind of bridging AI and voice together in order to kind of create that kind of richness of analytics and business communication insights that businesses these days crave from enterprise and to some degree sometimes as well down to SMBs.
Yeah, and we're seeing obviously the sort of buzz idiom phrase within the industry over the last 18 months has been AI. It's completely dependent on the underlying data. And as we talked about, it provides those sort of key data points. I wonder if you could talk about your definitely putting a huge amount of development into this. What are you looking at in terms of the future around voice capability?
I think it's very much equipping the service providers. So I think it depends on market to market, and it depends on the kind of the maturity of kind of where they are. So if you think of the Nordics, for example, very very kind of in the future in terms of, well, from our perspective anyway, in terms of FMC, FMU, this is where actually our UCaaS in those areas are powering over 2 million users, and FMC is really advantageous. And you take other markets such as France and Germany, for example, where actually a lot of it is kind of still on-prem with legacy PBXs and UCs. So, we understand that different markets have different rates of acceleration into cloud, and the move will happen at some point, just later for others. But our real focus is to make sure that we offer the best possible solution as a middleware provider, to make sure that any organization, depending on where their UC and PBX is at, can actually access other kind of larger kind of hyperscale UCaaSs and leverage all the capabilities, the features that they've kind of accrued over time, and then plug that into something that end users, specifically if we take Teams as an example, have been using for a number of years, and really kind of leverage that the capabilities of the endpoint.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of those big vendors, Microsoft, Cisco, Zoom, leveraging huge investments in what you can do with that voice data in terms of, we've already talked about it, transcription, summarization, sentiment analysis, voice AI pieces around security and biometrics. I think that there's a lot of things to come in the future. But you mentioned a really key point there, which I think is critical to this, which is capturing those voice conversations. So I tend to get very fixated with the sort of fixed line communications, but there's a huge number of a huge proportion of the workforce that most of their voice interaction will be mobile centric. And obviously you mentioned the Nordics there and an FMC focus. It's really important as a sort of first point to be able to capture all of these voice interactions and not leave it siloed to sort of fixed line conversations.
It is as well, and I think actually the kind of we don't talk about the pandemic and more that's kind of happened. It's a period of time, but obviously we now come out of that as kind of this hybrid work environment which we now work in. But if we think about kind of the pandemic in general and the kind of the interactions that were had, especially on the mobile, using personal numbers in the financial sector in the US, huge fines were dished out because it wasn't controlled. There was no security wrapped around it, no compliance at all. So I think actually FMC as a kind of as a capability is incredibly important. And the one barrier that we've come up against actually quite a bit is actually how ready certain markets are for FMC, and actually understanding what FMC can bring. If you ask people, say, "Oh, we've got a mobile UCaaS anyway." Well, you think you do, but you don't, because actually you're just kind of leveraging the over-the-top app. Take Teams as an example, but you're still using data, is still voice-based using data, whereas FMC leverages the carrier network, and so you kind of get a rich voice quality, but you're able to kind of have that kind of unified experience with kind of the kind of call transcription, call recording, etc., into a UCaaS. And other integrations as well, such as CRM integrations, which is something that's really coming to the fore as well. So creating that unified experience, but people really need to kind of understand how to leverage mobile for that, to that advantage.
Yeah, I saw some research, I think it was from Forbes, that 80% of the global workforce is what they would define as a sort of frontline worker. And you mentioned some of that data that we're going to miss through over-the-top app communication when people are using their own personal mobile, when there's, not the cellular Wi-Fi coverage available. So I think capturing all of that data is really important. And you mentioned the integration piece. So Cavell, and obviously you appeared at our Summit EU, we were talking about the concept of the intelligent workplace, where all of the different business systems that an enterprise uses in an ideal world are linked together, integrated together, so that data can flow across those systems. You can therefore apply intelligence across them. And to your point, UCaaS, mobile systems, contact center systems, and straight into your data management systems, your CRM system. So do you think that that's sort of the next step for service providers, ensuring that they're currently managing the majority of this voice traffic? Their next priority is making sure that enterprises can fully integrate it and utilize it across the business?
I think so. because I think there was something that you guys mentioned recently on podcasts about the kind of the multi-platform dilemma. I think it was. I can't remember the exact title of it. But this comes into play. You've got you've kind of you have all these capabilities and all requirements that you have. This has kind of resulted in a kind of a plethora of systems that you have, and it's kind of a bit of a spaghetti. And now there's this kind of focus on consolidating everything down into something a bit more manageable. Especially from an enterprise perspective, where the cost base around this is actually significant, and you've got teams and teams of people full time just having to kind of manage this to make sure that the business stays right, the business kind of continues, and any change to that can have some kind of catastrophic effects. So we need to make sure that that's going to looked at, and enterprises kind of manage that appropriately. But when it comes to voice, I think the simple proposition about all of our Teams integrations is very, very simple. Take Call to Teams, for example. Very simple, plug and play. Have your existing PBX and UC. You want to sweat that asset, that's absolutely fine. You've got all your kind of everything set up before in terms of your IVR, your call routing, ACD groups. Fine, take that, plug it into something super simple. We can get you into an endpoint, and then we can then help you kind of grow your business in terms of revenue, ARPU, and the like as well. So we sit very neatly in the middle, but it's kind of a seamless transition for them into new opportunities.
Yeah, and I think you make a key point there in terms of visibility. So it's not just across all of the different communication mediums, and we talked about from the voice side, sort of fixed line and mobile. It's also from a service provider perspective. You talked about that, the dilemma of multiple UC platforms and the need to consolidate. You've got all of those communication mediums, but they might be multiplied across multiple systems. So the sort of visibility, rationalization and access of that voice data is so important if you want to leverage it for these emerging use cases across artificial intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you go down a level in terms of altitude. We talk about CX and EX as well, and PX to some degree as well. So it's really important that perhaps there's been some fixation, perhaps on kind of the service proposition and journey there, which is still incredibly important. But actually, what does it now mean for customer experience, especially in kind of the contact center world, where that's starting to explode a little bit in terms of focus. We then obviously have the employees as well, which I think sometimes is not necessarily given the spotlight it probably deserves. If we think about take FMC as such an example, it used to be given mobiles. I was given a Samsung way back when as a mobile phone, so straight away you have two handsets. I hate Samsungs. Sorry, Samsung, if you're listening, but I hate Samsungs. I'm an Apple guy. Give me an Apple phone, or if you want to just give me a business number and I can put it on my single device I'm used to using every day, fantastic. All speaks to the UCAS, mobile UC. Fantastic. And it's the same when it comes to kind of dire routing, where if you're missing opportunities where you've got lots of people or lots of businesses using Microsoft Teams as their endpoint, they're not going to want to switch between two different softwares or two different platforms, one for voice calling, one for collaboration. There's a really kind of I guess critical part for them to be able to kind of plug it all in. They have their internal communication and collaboration, but also you can have telephony features added onto that as well, leveraging all the good stuff about the UC and PBX is being plugged into, and then leveraging all the good stuff that Microsoft brings in terms of layering on that capability on top of voice, which we mentioned at the right beginning, right, which is kind of the data stuff, the sentiment piece of the call recording, transcriptions, and the like. So that's where I think we sit in. If we kind of bring it back to the whole thing around at the beginning, voice for us is incredibly important. We feel we are very well positioned to help service providers across the globe maximize that opportunity.
Yeah, I think you've made the key point there in the end. Ultimately, it's about user experience, and still our data shows that voice telephony is one of, if not the most popular communication mediums. As we've said on the call, it provides a much richer data set and alleles of data for service providers and those intelligence providers to use. So I think it's only going to rise in importance in the future. We did our generational research survey, so when we looked at younger generations, how they like to communicate, and I had some preconceptions which you should never had, which you should go into data, was that younger generations, so Gen Z, might not like to use the phone as much. That's actually not the case. That voice data is still important, and we talk about other communication mediums, still voice is going to be critical. When you mentioned the contact center, we looked specifically at how you'd like to interact with a business. And for anything important, as soon as it becomes critical, urgent, or complicated, consumers want to communicate communicate through a business through voice communication channels. So I think it's not going away in terms of importance.
No, it's not. And I think it's a really important distinction that you make is between kind of personal and business. So for me personally, I'll WhatsApp my friends or I'll WhatsApp my family. You know, I call them, but it's on WhatsApp. Where it becomes a business conversation, I want to speak to someone, booking a holiday, book it online, that's fair enough. But, take HMRC, for example, you can do the chat with them in bits and pieces, but if it's your tax, you want to talk to someone. And for me, that's really important. I think actually all generations will adopt that because voice is still really important. It allows you in real time to get across your point and be absolutely clear in terms of what you need out of that conversation. So, yeah, it's not going to go away anytime soon for sure.
Great. Well, that is it for today's conversation. Lee, massive thanks for joining me on the call today.
No problem. My pleasure.
What I also wanted to plug as well, we've been working in conjunction with you and Destiny across a number of white papers around this topic, both on the importance of FMC and capturing those mobile conversations, but also looking ahead to how important voice is from a sort of general perspective from a service provider. So if you're a listener on this, if you want to understand more about Destiny and what they're doing, you can head to Destiny's website, or you can keep an eye out for the upcoming Cavell and Destiny white papers that will be released over the next coming couple of months. But for now though, Lee, thanks for joining me on the podcast. Appreciate having you on.
My pleasure. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks everyone. Speak to you soon.